Thanks for clicking. Let's get right into this full story. Hi everyone. I live in a suburban neighborhood with fairly small lots, so my neighbor's large oak tree looms over a good portion of my yard. The tree is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but its branches have started dropping larger sticks, and during storms, it's a real hazard. Last month, one of the branches cracked and fell onto my garden, smashing a section of my fence. Luckily, it didn't hit anything valuable, but I'm worried it's only a matter of time before a branch hits my shed, or worse, my house. I brought this up to my neighbor, Linda, and she told me she's aware the tree is old but doesn't think it's in danger of falling anytime soon. I asked if she'd consider removing it or at least trimming the overhanging branches. She brushed me off, saying it's on her property, so it's her decision. After some research, I found out that if I want to trim branches overhanging my yard, I'd have to pay for it myself, even though it's her tree. I got a quote from an arborist, but they recommended removing the whole tree due to its age and health. They said it would cost about $3,000, which I obviously can't afford on my own. I went back to Linda and asked if she'd be willing to split the cost of removing the tree. She was not happy. She accused me of trying to push expenses onto her for something that's my problem, since the tree hasn't caused damage to her property. She argued that it adds value to the neighborhood and gives our yards shade in the summer. I countered that the risk of damage seems to outweigh the benefits, especially since it's primarily over my yard. She got defensive, saying if I was that worried, I should just pay to trim the branches on my side and leave her out of it. I don't want to start a feud with Linda. She's been a decent neighbor otherwise, but I feel like I'm being reasonable. The tree benefits both of us, but the risk is almost entirely mine. After that tense conversation, I decided to cool off for a bit. I didn't want to escalate things, so I stopped bringing it up for a while. But then, the weather decided not to cooperate. About 2 weeks later, we had a massive storm roll through, one of those early spring storms with heavy rain and strong winds. I was up half the night listening to the howling wind and watching branches sway dangerously close to my house. Sure enough, the next morning, I found one of the smaller branches had fallen and smashed into my patio furniture. The tree was fine, but I wasn't. That was it for me. I texted Linda, letting her know what had happened, and said we really needed to talk about the tree again. She didn't reply right away, so I waited a couple of hours before heading over to knock on her door. She opened it with a tight smile. I saw your text, she said. But I don't know what else you expect me to say. I just think this is becoming more serious, I replied, keeping my voice as calm as I could. It's only a matter of time before something bigger falls and causes real damage. She sighed and leaned against the doorframe. Look, I get it. It's not ideal. But I can't afford to take that tree down right now. My son's college tuition is coming up, and that's where all my extra money is going. I'm sorry. I told her I understood her financial situation, but I was also in a tight spot. I didn't want to keep shelling out money to fix things every time a branch fell, and the risk to my house was stressing me out. That's when she said something that made me pause. Have you talked to your insurance about this? They might help cover some of it if it's a hazard. I hadn't thought about that. So, I called my insurance company, explained the situation, and asked what they'd cover. Turns out, they wouldn't pay to remove the tree preemptively, only if it actually caused damage. Great. Armed with this new information, I went back to Linda one last time. I proposed splitting the cost into monthly payments to make it manageable. She still wasn't thrilled, but she seemed to soften a little. Let me think about it, she said, finally. A few days later, she came over with a compromise. She was willing to split the cost of trimming the branches hanging over my yard but not removing the entire tree. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was better than nothing. We called the arborist back out, and they trimmed the branches. The total cost was about $1,200, and we split it evenly. For a while, things felt settled. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't help feeling like we just kicked the can down the road. The tree was still there, old and leaning, and I knew the next big storm could bring a bigger problem. Fast forward 3 months, and guess what? The entire tree came down in another storm. Miraculously, it didn't hit my house, but it did crush her garden shed. Linda called me in a panic, and I'll admit, a small part of me thought, well, now you care. But I swallowed that petty thought and helped her call the arborist for emergency removal. The cost? A whopping $4,000. She didn't ask me to chip in this time. The morning after the tree fell, Linda knocked on my door. When I opened it, she looked exhausted, still wearing the same clothes from the day before, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, she said, her voice quieter than usual. I wasn't expecting that. For what? For brushing you off, she admitted, sighing heavily. You were right. I should have taken this more seriously. I thought I was saving money, but now I'm out thousands of dollars anyway. And my shed, she shook her head. I should have just listened. Her sudden honesty caught me off guard, but I appreciated it. It's okay, I said. I get it. Nobody wants to deal with something like this unless they absolutely have to. I just wish it hadn't taken this to get here. Linda nodded, then hesitated. I wanted to ask would you be willing to help with the cost of the removal? I know it's technically my tree, but it affected both of us. I could feel my patience slipping. I'd already chipped in for the trimming. Now she wanted me to help clean up a mess that landed squarely on her property? Still, I didn't want to blow up on her, especially since she just apologized. I'll think about it, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. But honestly, Linda, this feels like something your insurance should help with. Have you talked to them? I called them this morning, she said, but they're being really strict about what they'll cover. They're saying the shed wasn't on my policy, and the tree removal is considered maintenance, not damage. She gave me a desperate look. I'm just stuck. That's when I had an idea. I remembered how she'd mentioned her son's college tuition as one of her big financial stresses. I didn't have much wiggle room in my budget, but maybe we could trade something other than money. How about this, I said. I can't pay for the removal, but if you're really in a bind, I can help with the cleanup. I've got a chainsaw, and I can borrow a truck to haul some of the debris. That should cut down on the overall cost, at least. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. You'd really do that? Yeah, I said. But I can't do it alone. You'll need to pitch in too. Of course, she said quickly. Anything to save a few bucks. Over the next few weekends, we worked together to clear the mess. It wasn't easy, splitting logs, hauling branches, and making countless trips to the local yard waste facility. But something surprising happened during that time. We talked. Not just about the tree or the money, but about life. Linda told me about her son's dream of becoming an engineer, how she was trying to hold everything together as a single mom, and how much she hated asking for help. I told her about my own struggles balancing work and home repairs, and how I was trying to save up for a new roof. By the time we were done, the tension between us had eased. The yard looked clear, the costs were manageable, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were actually neighbors again, not just two people stuck on opposite sides of a fence. A few weeks later, Linda surprised me with a handwritten card and a small potted plant. Inside the card, she'd written, "Thank you for helping me when I didn't deserve it. I'm lucky to have a neighbor like you." I kept the plant on my windowsill as a reminder that sometimes, compromise and a little extra effort can turn even the most frustrating situations into something meaningful.